The crack of AK-47 gunfire shattered the Arctic silence of Alaska. Megan Hayes collapsed one of first into the snow, her M4 carbine sliding from her grip as Lieutenant Morrison's combat boot slammed between her shoulder blades. "Dead weight," his voice cut through the howling wind like a blade. 18 years old and weak as a drowned kitten. Go back to shoveling snow for your foster daddy. The SEAL team surrounding them erupted in harsh laughter. Rodriguez, a mountain of muscle in green military fatigues, spat into the snow, the saliva landing on Megan's worn combat boots. Gateguard's daughter. Base was so desperate for numbers they took literal garbage. Carter kicked snow into her face as she struggled to rise, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow over her small form. Bet she can't even do 10 push-ups without crying for mommy. Oh wait, mommy's dead, isn't she? Megan pushed herself up slowly, snow clinging to her light gray t-shirt, her hands trembling in the -40-degree cold. Her light brown hair, tied in a messy high bun with loose curls framing her face, was now dusted white with ice crystals. She didn't resist when Blake grabbed her backpack and dumped its contents into the snow, medical supplies and personal items scattering across the frozen ground. Sergeant Blake stepped closer, his shaved head gleaming despite the overcast sky. "Heard your mother died in combat? Probably just as pathetic as you." The words struck like physical blows, but Megan's green eyes remained fixed on the ground, her fingers clenching involuntarily before relaxing again. Through the security cameras mounted on the nearby barracks, Colonel Marcus watched the scene unfold, his weathered face tightening with each passing second. Not one of the 50 elite Navy SEALs surrounding this 18-year-old girl knew that the person they were grinding into the Alaskan permafrost carried the bloodline of the most terrifying female sniper in United States military history. And within 72 hours, when real enemies crossed the border with murder in their hearts, they would understand why the codename Viper 2 could make an entire Spetsnaz unit retreat in absolute terror. If watching a young woman get brutally bullied by an entire team of elite warriors makes your blood boil, don't miss what happens next. Hit that like button right now to support the silent warriors, those who carry true power but choose to hide it beneath weakness. Subscribe to the channel and press the thanks button below. Your support helps me continue telling stories about unnamed heroes walking among us. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks the weakest. The mess hall at Fort Richardson, Alaska was supposed to be neutral ground, a place where even the harshest training briefly paused for basic human needs. But for Megan Hayes, it had become another battlefield where she had no weapons to defend herself. She sat alone in the furthest corner, her tray containing the standard military meal that tasted like cardboard soaked in grease. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look older, harder, more cruel than they probably were. Rodriguez approached with 3 other SEALs flanking him, their boots thundering across the linoleum floor in practiced synchronization. Without warning, he accidentally knocked his tray, sending scalding soup cascading across Megan's lap. She gasped, jumping up as the liquid burned through her pants, but no sound of complaint escaped her lips. The entire hall erupted in laughter, phones appearing from pockets as several soldiers began recording what they assumed would be premium entertainment. "Oh no, did I make a mess?" Rodriguez's voice dripped with mock concern as he leaned in close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Maybe you should run to Daddy. Oh wait, that's not your real daddy, is it? Just some old fool who felt sorry for an orphan." Morrison appeared behind her, using his full 6'4" height advantage to loom over her 5'6" frame. "Look at those shaking hands. Can't even hold a spoon steady. How are you supposed to hold a rifle when the enemy comes?" Elena, the base medic, moved as if to help, her hand already reaching for napkins from the dispenser. But a sharp look from Captain Walsh froze her in place. Walsh, 43 years old with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat, shook his head slowly. "Natural selection, Elena. The weak get weeded out. It's better she learns now than gets someone killed later." Megan's response was to carefully fold her napkin in a precise military pattern, each corner aligned perfectly despite her trembling fingers. She dabbed at the soup stains methodically, the action so controlled it seemed almost mechanical. Old Hayes, her foster father, watched from the kitchen doorway, where he worked his second job after gate duty. The 70-year-old man's hands gripped his mop handle until his knuckles went white, but he knew intervention would only make things worse for her. The first breadcrumb had been laid, though no one noticed. The way Megan folded that napkin wasn't something you learned in basic training. It was muscle memory, drilled into special operations personnel who needed to maintain equipment in complete darkness, where every movement had to be precise, deliberate, purposeful. But to the laughing crowd around her, she was just a scared little girl playing with her food. Back in her barracks that night, Megan discovered her gear systematically destroyed. Her sleeping bag had been slashed with a knife, the synthetic filling spilling out like wounded intestines. Her boots had been filled with water and left outside to freeze solid. Across her locker, someone had written "dead weight" in permanent marker, the letters 2 feet tall and impossible to miss. She stood there for a long moment, studying the vandalism with an expression that gave nothing away. Blake appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over his massive chest. "Problem, recruit? Maybe if you can't take care of your equipment, you shouldn't be here." Behind him, Carter laughed while live streaming to his Instagram followers. "Check this out, guys. The weakest recruit in SEAL history. Bet she doesn't last another week." Megan's response was to pull out a small repair kit from her personal bag, one of the few things that hadn't been destroyed. She began fixing her gear with movements so fluid and practiced that Blake's smirk faltered for just a moment. The way she handled the needle and thread, creating perfect military stitches in the destroyed fabric. The way she scraped ice from her boots with precise angles that wouldn't damage the leather. These weren't the fumbling attempts of a teenager. These were the actions of someone who had repaired equipment under fire, in darkness, with death breathing down their neck. Morrison arrived for the 2300 hours inspection, his eyes scanning the damaged gear with satisfaction. "Daddy's little girl having trouble? Maybe you should call him to pick you up. I'm sure he's got some toilets that need cleaning back at the gate." He kicked her repaired sleeping bag, undoing 20 minutes of careful work. "Pathetic. Your mother must be rolling in her grave knowing what a disappointment you turned out to be." The second breadcrumb fell as Megan reassembled her rifle for inspection. Her hands moved with impossible speed, each component sliding into place with the soft click of perfect alignment. Morrison grabbed the weapon to inspect it, expecting to find errors he could exploit. Instead, he found himself holding a rifle that had been maintained to a level beyond even special operations standards. Every surface had been cleaned, every moving part lubricated with exactly the right amount of oil, every adjustment calibrated to perfection. For 3 seconds, confusion flickered across his face before he covered it with another sneer. "Lucky. Even broken clocks are right twice a day." The next morning brought rifle qualification at the outdoor range, where the Alaskan wind howled at -25 knots and visibility dropped to less than 300 meters. The other recruits were assigned standard targets at 400 meters, challenging but achievable for trained marksmen. Megan, however, found herself directed to the 800-meter lane, a distance that would challenge even experienced snipers in these conditions. Carter strutted over, pulling out a wad of cash from his pocket. $50 says she doesn't hit the target even once. Hell, 100 says she doesn't even get close enough to see the impact. Money began changing hands as the entire unit gathered to watch what they assumed would be spectacular failure. Even Elena, watching from the medical station, felt her heart sink. 800 meters in these conditions was virtually impossible for anyone, let alone an 18-year-old girl who had shown no particular skill with firearms. Megan settled into her shooting position, with movements that seemed almost lazy, her body naturally finding the perfect alignment despite the frozen ground beneath her. She adjusted the scope with quick, precise turns, her eye reading the wind patterns in the swirling snow with an ease that would have alarmed anyone paying attention. But they were all too busy laughing, too busy filming, too busy congratulating themselves on witnessing what would surely become a legendary failure. She fired 3 shots in rapid succession, the rifle barely moving despite the powerful recoil. All 3 shots went wide, missing the target completely. The laughter was deafening, soldiers literally falling over each other in their mirth. Rodriguez collected his winnings while Morrison clapped slowly, mockingly. "Outstanding performance, Hayes, really showing us that killer instinct." But something bothered the range officer, Master Chief Williams, a man who had been running this range for 15 years. The trajectory of those misses had been too consistent, too precisely calculated. It was almost as if she had been aiming at something else entirely. The third breadcrumb had been dropped, though it would only make sense later. Each of those missed shots had actually struck exactly where Megan intended, accounting for wind speed, barometric pressure, the Coriolis effect, and even the slight variation in bullet weight between rounds. She had been gathering data, testing the rifle's true capability versus its stated specifications, preparing for something none of them could imagine was coming. Physical training that afternoon pushed everyone to their limits. 10 miles through knee-deep snow, full combat load, with the temperature dropping steadily toward -40. Megan ran in the middle of the pack initially, her smaller frame working harder to push through the deep drifts that the larger men could power through. At mile 6, Walsh jogged up beside her, matching her pace with ease despite being nearly twice her age. "You know what your problem is, Hayes?" He didn't wait for an answer. "You don't belong here. This is a warrior's world, and you're just a little girl playing dress-up in Daddy's borrowed boots." He stuck his foot out, a subtle movement that sent her tumbling into a deep snowdrift. By the time she climbed out, the main group was 100 meters ahead and pulling away. But something strange happened then. Instead of struggling to catch up with desperate, energy-wasting movements, Megan settled into a rhythm that seemed almost supernatural. Her feet found purchase on frozen ground that others missed. Her body moved through the snow like she was born to it. Her breathing remained steady despite the burning cold air that made every breath feel like swallowing glass. She didn't catch the group, but she didn't fall further behind either. She moved like a ghost through the Alaskan wilderness, barely disturbing the snow she passed through. Morrison noticed her keeping pace and fell back to run beside her. "Look at you, struggling just to keep up. Weakest recruit in SEAL history. Your mother died a hero, and you're going to wash out in week 1. What a waste of genetics." He shoulder-checked her hard, sending her stumbling again, but she recovered with a fluidity that made him frown. Something about the way she moved, the way she automatically adjusted her center of gravity, the way her hand went to her hip as if reaching for something that wasn't there. It was familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. The 4th breadcrumb scattered in the snow behind her. Those who knew what to look for would have recognized the running pattern. It was the same technique used by long-range reconnaissance units who needed to cover vast distances while leaving minimal trace, conserving energy for the shot that might come at the end of a 3-day stalk. But Morrison was too busy feeling superior to notice, and the others were too focused on their own suffering to pay attention to the ghost running in their wake. That night, Megan drew watch duty from 0200 to 0400 hours, the coldest, darkest part of the Alaskan night. She stood at her post, the aurora borealis dancing overhead in sheets of green and gold that would have been beautiful if not for the bone-deep cold that made every breath visible and every movement painful. Most recruits on watch simply endured, counting the minutes until relief arrived. But Megan scanned the perimeter with an intensity that suggested she actually expected to see something. At 0317, she did. A flash of movement in the tree line, barely visible against the snow-covered pines. Then another and another. She reached for her radio, calling it into the command post. "Gate tower to command. I have movement in Sector 7. Multiple contacts, approximately 300 meters out." Walsh's voice crackled back immediately, irritation clear even through the static. "Negative, Hayes. You're seeing things. Probably just your imagination or wildlife. Maintain your post and stop wasting our time with false alarms." Rodriguez, who was supposed to be sleeping but had been monitoring the radio for exactly this kind of opportunity, chimed in on the backup channel that all the SEALs shared. "Is the little girl seeing her mommy's ghost? Maybe she's come to take you away from all us mean boys." The laughter that followed on the channel would have broken most people, but Megan simply adjusted her position slightly, her eyes tracking the movement that she knew with absolute certainty wasn't wildlife. She counted 6, maybe 7 figures, moving with tactical spacing through the trees. They were good, whoever they were, but not good enough to be completely invisible to someone who had been trained to see what others missed. Old Hayes appeared at the base of the tower, climbing up with a thermos of hot soup, despite his arthritic joints protesting every rung of the ladder. "Brought you something warm," he said quietly, his voice carrying the slight Irish accent that 40 years in America hadn't erased. He handed her the thermos, but as he did, his other hand discreetly placed a small box on the platform. Anyone watching would have thought it was just an old man being kind to his foster daughter. They wouldn't have noticed that the box contained 20 rounds of 3 Lapua Magnum, match-grade ammunition that cost more per round than most people made in an hour. "Thanks, Dad," Megan said, the first word she'd spoken directly to him since arriving at the base. Hayes looked at her for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of what he knew, what he had always known about the girl he'd raised for the past 10 years. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly, then climbed back down before anyone could question why the base's gate guard was visiting during a watch shift. The 5th breadcrumb had been delivered, though its significance wouldn't become clear until bullets started flying and lives hung in the balance. Colonel Marcus called a surprise inspection at 0600, catching most of the recruits still struggling out of their destroyed sleeping bags. He moved through the barracks with the efficiency of a man who had done this thousands of times, his eyes missing nothing. When he reached Megan's area and saw the vandalism, the destroyed gear, the word dead weight still visible despite her attempts to clean it, his jaw tightened imperceptibly. Whose rifle is this? He held up Megan's M4, which she had cleaned and reassembled after yesterday's range session. Blake stepped forward immediately, eager to throw her under the bus. That's Hayes' weapon, sir. She probably damaged it herself for attention. You know how desperate some people get when they realize they don't belong here. Marcus examined the rifle with the eye of someone who had carried similar weapons through 3 wars. The bore was spotless, the action smooth as silk, every component exactly where it should be. But, more than that, there were subtle modifications that only someone with extensive combat experience would know to make. The trigger pull had been adjusted to exactly 4.5 pounds, the sweet spot for precision shooting. The scope had been zeroed not for the shooting range, but for the specific ballistic coefficient of match-grade ammunition at high altitude. This rifle, Marcus said slowly, is maintained to a level I rarely see even among seasoned operators. His eyes found Megan, who stood at attention with the others, her face revealing nothing. Recruit Hayes, where did you learn to maintain a weapon like this? Before she could answer, Morrison interjected. Probably YouTube, sir. You can learn anything online these days. Doesn't mean she can actually shoot it. Marcus's eyes flashed dangerously, but he maintained his composure. I'll be observing tomorrow's emergency drill personally. I want to see how all of you perform under pressure. He set the rifle down carefully, treating it with more respect than he had shown to any other equipment that morning. As he walked out, he made a mental note to pull Megan's file again. Something wasn't adding up, and in his experience, things that didn't add up in the military usually meant someone was keeping secrets. Have you noticed something unusual about the way Megan handles her weapon? If you've served in the military, drop a comment below. I guarantee you'll spot details that civilians would miss entirely. Share this video with your friends and see if they can guess Megan's secret before the big reveal. The emergency drill began at 1900 hours, just as the last light faded from the Alaskan sky. The scenario was simple. The base's radar system had gone down, and teams needed to patrol the perimeter to ensure no hostiles took advantage of the vulnerability. What the recruits didn't know was that the radar failure wasn't part of the drill. Someone had hacked the system 3 hours ago, and Colonel Marcus was running this exercise while his tech team frantically tried to restore their electronic eyes. Morrison led his team of 6 through the northern sector, with Megan relegated to rear security, the position typically given to the weakest member. Rodriguez and Carter flanked Morrison, while Blake and Walsh took the middle positions. They moved through the forest in what they thought was tactical formation, their night vision goggles painting the world in shades of green. "Contact left!" Carter suddenly called out, spotting movement through the trees. The team dropped to defensive positions, weapons raised, but it was just a moose, massive and unbothered by their presence, continuing its nighttime foraging. Rodriguez laughed, the sound carrying further than it should have in the still air. "Nice one, Carter, really showing that combat readiness." He stood up, relaxing his guard, and that's when Megan noticed it. The moose's behavior was wrong. It should have reacted to their presence, should have at least looked up at the sound of voices, but it continued eating as if they weren't there, as if something else had its attention, something that scared it more than 6 armed humans. "We should move," Megan said quietly, her first words during the entire patrol. Morrison whirled on her, anger flashing in his eyes. "Did I ask for your opinion, deadweight? You speak when spoken to, and maybe not even then." He turned back to the front, missing the way Megan's hand had shifted to her sidearm, her fingers finding the grip with practiced ease. She wasn't reaching for it because of Morrison. She was preparing for what she knew was coming. The 6th breadcrumb fell as she identified what the others had missed. Footprints in the snow, barely visible even with night vision, but following a pattern she recognized. Russian military boots, the distinctive tread pattern they hadn't changed since the Cold War. 7, maybe 8 sets, moving in a tactical column through the trees parallel to their own path. They were being shadowed, and her team had no idea. "Possible contact, 300 meters, 10 o'clock, she reported, protocol overriding Morrison's order for silence. This time, Walsh didn't dismiss it immediately. Something in her tone, the absolute certainty despite the impossibility of seeing anything at that distance in these conditions, made him pause. "I don't see anything," Blake said, scanning with his rifle scope. "She's hallucinating. Probably hypothermia setting in. Weak little—" The crack of a rifle shot cut him off mid-insult. Blake's night vision goggles exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic, the bullet passing close enough to leave a groove in the armored housing without penetrating. He screamed, dropping his rifle and clutching his face, though the only damage was to his equipment and his confidence. "Contact! Contact!" Morrison shouted, diving for cover as more shots rang out, muzzle flashes lighting up the tree line like deadly fireflies. But these weren't blanks or training rounds. The bark exploding from trees, the whistle of bullets passing overhead, the sharp crack of supersonic rounds. This was real. "It's part of the drill," Morrison insisted, even as he pressed himself deeper into the snow. "Has to be. Advanced training scenario?" But his voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Real bullets sounded different from blanks, felt different when they passed close enough to feel the pressure wave. Megan had already moved, her smaller frame allowing her to slip between trees that would have exposed the larger men. She counted muzzle flashes, calculated distances, identified weapons by their sound signatures. 7 shooters, spread in a classic ambush formation. AK-74s mostly, but at least one SVD sniper rifle providing overwatch. These weren't American military weapons. These weren't part of any drill. "We need to move south," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with surprising authority. "There's a ravine 60 meters back that provides defilade from their position. We can—" "Shut up!" Morrison screamed, panic replacing his usual arrogance. "Just shut up and let me think!" He grabbed his radio, trying to call for support, but all he got was static. The enemy had brought jammers, professional ones that could blank out military frequencies. This was a real incursion, and they were cut off from help. Carter took a round in the shoulder, the impact spinning him around before he collapsed into the snow. His scream was high and terrified, the sound of someone who had never experienced real combat despite all his training. Rodriguez tried to reach him, but another burst of fire forced him back into cover. They were pinned, outgunned, and rapidly running out of options. "Medic!" Rodriguez shouted, forgetting that they didn't have one, that this was supposed to be a simple perimeter patrol. Elena was back at the base, probably asleep, certainly not here where they desperately needed her. Walsh fired back, his shots disciplined but ineffective against enemies he couldn't see clearly. The incoming fire intensified, and Morrison made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed if anyone survived to report it. "Every man for himself. Fall back to the base." He turned and ran, abandoning his wounded teammate and any pretense of leadership. Blake followed immediately, his destroyed night vision goggles left behind in the snow. Rodriguez hesitated, torn between helping Carter and following his training to preserve his own life. In the end, self-preservation won, and he too disappeared into the darkness. Only Walsh and Megan remained, pressed behind a cluster of rocks that provided minimal cover from the incoming fire. Walsh looked at the 18-year-old girl beside him, expecting to see terror, tears, the complete breakdown that anyone would forgive given the circumstances. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Her green eyes were calm, calculating, almost bored. She was counting something under her breath, her fingers moving in a pattern he recognized from sniper teams tracking multiple targets. 7 shooters, she said quietly, 2 moving to flank us from the east. The sniper is repositioning to cut off our retreat. In about 30 seconds, we'll be completely surrounded. She pulled off her backpack, revealing the contents she'd been carrying this entire time. Not the standard recruit loadout, but specialized equipment that shouldn't have been available to anyone below special operations clearance. Her backpack contained encrypted communication devices featuring military-grade smartphone technology with satellite connectivity capabilities, maintaining secure data transmission even in the harsh Alaskan environment. The ruggedized tablet she pulled out had been designed specifically for extreme battlefield conditions, its reinforced screen capable of withstanding impacts and temperatures that would destroy civilian electronics. She typed a quick message on the tablet, coordinates, and tactical data flowing across the screen faster than Walsh could follow. "What are you?" Walsh began, but she cut him off with a look that belonged on someone 3 times her age. "Stay here. Keep your head down. Whatever you see, whatever happens, do not move from this position." She started to rise and Walsh grabbed her arm instinctively. "You can't go out there. It's suicide. You're just a kid." Megan looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. For the first time since arriving at the base, she smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. It was the kind of smile predators gave before they struck. "I haven't been a kid since I was 8 years old, Captain. And these aren't soldiers. They're targets." Before sharing the biggest reveal of this story, hit that share button right now. The moment that's about to unfold will completely change how you see this young woman. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, leave a like. This story is for you. She pulled free from Walsh's grip and disappeared into the swirling snow, moving with a fluidity that made her previous displays of clumsiness seem like an elaborate act. Walsh pressed himself deeper into cover, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. The way she'd analyzed the tactical situation, the equipment she somehow had access to, the absolute confidence in her voice when she'd called armed soldiers targets. None of it made sense unless the first shot came exactly 90 seconds after Megan vanished into the storm. It was different from the rapid automatic fire that had been suppressing them. This was a single, precise crack that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Through a brief gap in the snow, Walsh saw one of the enemy soldiers drop, his rifle falling from lifeless fingers. Before the body hit the ground, another shot rang out, and another enemy fell. The incoming fire shifted, no longer focused on Walsh's position but spreading out, searching for this new threat. The enemy commander was shouting in Russian, his voice carrying notes of confusion and growing fear. They had expected to ambush untrained recruits, not face a ghost in the storm picking them off one by one. 8 minutes, that's how long it took. 8 minutes of precision shooting that defied everything Walsh knew about combat marksmanship. 12 shots, 12 kills, each one delivered through driving snow and howling wind, at distances that should have been impossible. The Barrett N82A1's distinctive roar had replaced the crack of smaller caliber weapons, its 50 caliber rounds punching through cover like it was tissue paper. The radio in Walsh's vest suddenly crackled to life, impossible since the jammers should have blocked everything. But Megan's encrypted equipment had found a way through, piggyback riding on satellite frequencies the Russians hadn't thought to block. Alpha 7 to base. Alpha 7 to base. We have contact with hostile forces in Sector 9. 12 enemy KIA, requesting immediate QRF and medical support. We have 1 wounded. Colonel Marcus's voice came back immediately, professional despite the shock he must have been feeling. Alpha 7, identify yourself. Who is this? Stand by for authentication, Megan's voice replied, and then she spoke a series of numbers and letters that meant nothing to Walsh but caused dead silence on the other end of the radio. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Authentication confirmed. QRF is Oscar Mike. ETA 7 minutes. Viper 2, this is Blackjack Actual. Your cover is blown. Repeat, your cover is blown. Do you understand? Roger that, Blackjack. It was blown the moment they crossed the border. Someone told them exactly where to hit us. There was a pause, then, the mole is Blake. He's the only one who knew our patrol route in advance and had time to communicate it. Walsh's mind reeled. Viper 2. He'd heard that call sign before, in classified briefings about operations that officially never happened. But Viper 1 had been a legend, a female sniper who'd single-handedly held off 300 Taliban fighters for 16 hours, saving 73 civilians in the process. She died in that action, or so the reports said. But if Viper 1 had existed, and if she'd had a daughter, the sound of helicopters grew louder, the distinctive thrum of Black Hawks moving fast and low. Spotlights pierced the darkness, illuminating a scene that would be burned into Walsh's memory forever. Enemy bodies lay scattered across the snow in a perfect arc, each one dropped by a single precise shot. And walking through that field of death came Megan Hayes, the Barrett rifle carried casually in her arms like it weighed nothing at all. But it was her eyes that truly revealed the transformation. Gone was the scared teenage girl who'd been bullied and humiliated. In her place stood a warrior who'd been forged in secret training camps and baptized in violence before she could even drive. The foster daughter of a gate guard had never existed. This was Viper 2, and she'd come here hunting for something specific. Morrison, Rodriguez, and Blake had been rounded up by the QRF, found hiding in various locations around the base perimeter. Blake was in flex cuffs, his face pale, as he realized his treason had been exposed. Morrison couldn't even look at Megan, his entire worldview shattered by the revelation that the weakest recruit he'd ever trained had just eliminated an entire Spetsnaz unit solo. But the real shock came when the enemy commander was dragged out of his hiding spot, wounded but alive. Megan had deliberately left him breathing, though the shot that had taken his knee apart showed she could have killed him just as easily. When he saw her walking toward him, his face went white as fresh snow. "Viper 2, he gasped in accented English. "You're real. They said you were myth, propaganda." His eyes darted around wildly. "Where is your team? Where are the others?" Megan crouched beside him, her voice conversational despite the blood seeping into the snow around them. "There is no team, Volkov. There never was. Just me, following breadcrumbs you've been leaving for 10 years. She pulled something from her pocket, a photograph, weathered and worn from years of handling. "You knew her, didn't you? Viper 1, my mother." Volkov's reaction was immediate and visceral. He tried to scramble backward despite his destroyed knee, genuine terror replacing his trained composure. "She's dead! We confirmed she died in Blackwater. The building collapsed. No one could have—" "She did die," Megan interrupted, "saving civilians from people like you. But before she died, she told me about Moscow, about the operation where a young Spetsnaz lieutenant named Volkov worked alongside American forces. Before you turned traitor, before you started selling information that got good people killed." She leaned closer. "She also told me about her spotter, my father, the man you captured and have been interrogating for the past 10 years. The revelation hung in the air like ice crystals, beautiful and sharp enough to cut." Volkov's eyes widened with understanding. This wasn't about the base, wasn't about the failed incursion. He'd been hunted by a ghost seeking answers about another ghost, and he'd walked right into her trap. Colonel Marcus arrived on scene in full tactical gear, something the recruits had never seen him wear. The man they knew as a desk commander moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in combat zones. He took in the scene with a single sweep of his eyes. The eliminated Spetsnaz team, Volkov wounded and restrained, Blake in custody, and Megan standing calmly in the center of it all with the Barrett rifle that had delivered death with surgical precision. "Clear the area," Marcus commanded. "Medical team, get Carter to the infirmary. Rodriguez, Morrison, Walsh, you're with me for debriefing. Now." His voice carried an edge that cut through their shock. As the SEALs moved to follow orders, Marcus approached Megan, his expression unreadable. When he was close enough that only she could hear, he spoke quietly. "Your mother saved my life in Kandahar, 2011. I've been waiting 10 years for you to show up." The revelation sent another ripple through Megan's carefully maintained composure. "You knew?" "I suspected when I saw your file. Hayes isn't your real name, is it? But when I saw how you maintained that rifle, how you moved when you thought no one was watching, I knew for certain." He glanced at Volkov, who was being loaded onto a stretcher under heavy guard. "We have 48 hours before his people realize the mission failed. That's our window to get answers." The debriefing room had been cleared of all non-essential personnel. Morrison sat rigid in his chair, his usual arrogance replaced by something approaching shell shock. Rodriguez kept rubbing his eyes as if trying to wake from a nightmare. Walsh remained silent, processing everything he'd witnessed. Blake was in a separate holding cell, his treachery confirmed by encrypted communications found on his personal devices. Marcus stood at the head of the table, a tablet in his hands displaying classified files that shouldn't have existed. "Gentlemen, what I'm about to share doesn't leave this room. The young woman you've been calling deadweight for the past week is Megan Mitchell, daughter of Master Sergeant Sarah Viper 1 Mitchell, the most decorated female sniper in United States military history." He swiped the screen, bringing up a photograph that made everyone lean forward. It showed a woman in full combat gear, face obscured by tactical paint, holding a rifle that looked identical to the one Megan had used. Operation Blackwater, October 2014. Sergeant Mitchell has held a defensive position alone for 16 hours against an estimated 300 Taliban fighters, allowing 73 civilian aid workers to evacuate. She died in that action, but not before eliminating over 100 enemy combatants. Morrison's face had gone pale. "That's impossible. No one could—" "The impossible was her specialty," Marcus interrupted. "But that's not the full story. Her spotter, Staff Sergeant David Chen, was captured 3 days before Blackwater. Intelligence suggested he was killed immediately, but recent SIGINT indicates he's been held in a Russian black site for the past decade. The Russians have been trying to extract information about our sniper training program, using him as leverage they never thought would be discovered." Rodriguez found his voice. "Why didn't they just trade him? Prisoner exchange? Because officially he doesn't exist. The operation he was captured during never happened, according to our records. The Russians couldn't admit they had him without revealing their own involvement in Afghan operations that violated several treaties. Marcus turned to Megan, who had remained silent throughout the briefing. Your mother spent her last 3 years trying to find proof he was alive. She died believing she'd failed. Megan's fingers traced the edge of the table, the first sign of emotion she'd shown since the shooting stopped. She didn't fail. She left me everything I needed: training locations, contact codes, even the maintenance pattern for that rifle. She knew I'd follow the breadcrumbs when I was ready. And Blake? Walsh asked, the pieces finally clicking. How long has he been compromised? Marcus pulled up another file, this one showing financial records that traced back through shell companies to Russian intelligence services. 3 years, best we can tell. He was recruited after a gambling debt left him desperate. He's been feeding them training schedules, personnel files, security protocols. Tonight's incursion was supposed to be a proof of concept, showing they could hit us anywhere, anytime. They didn't count on Viper 2 being here. The door opened, and old Hayes entered, moving with a spryness that belied his supposed 70 years. In the harsh fluorescent light, the SEALs could see what they'd missed before. The surgical scars on his hands, the way he held himself like a fighter, despite his aged appearance, the calculating intelligence and eyes they'd dismissed as belonging to a simple gate guard. Gentlemen, Hayes said, his Irish accent completely gone, replaced by pure American Midwest. Master Chief Patrick Hayes, retired. Navy Intelligence, Special Projects Division. I've been Megan's handler since her mother died. He looked at each of them in turn. Every insult you threw at her, every piece of equipment you destroyed, every moment of harassment, I recorded all of it. Your careers should be over. Morrison shot to his feet. You set us up. This whole thing was— Sit down, Lieutenant. Hayes' voice carried command authority that made Morrison drop back into his chair instantly. You weren't set up. You showed your true colors the moment you saw someone you perceived as weak. Megan could have revealed herself at any time, could have stopped the harassment with a single display of her capabilities. She chose to endure it to maintain her cover, to find the mole who was getting American soldiers killed. Rodriguez's hands clenched on the table. We didn't know. How could we know? That's exactly the point, Megan spoke for the first time since entering the room. You didn't know, so you assumed I was worthless. Every one of you decided I didn't belong here based on nothing more than my size, my age, and my apparent lack of skill. You never once considered that appearances might be deceiving. She looked directly at Morrison. You said my mother would be ashamed of me. My mother taught me that the most powerful weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. Thanks to your treatment, Volkov and his team never saw me coming. Through the one-way glass, they could see Volkov in the interrogation room, his destroyed knee wrapped, but still seeping blood. He was talking rapidly to CIA interrogators, desperate to trade information for medical care and potentially leniency. On the monitor broadcasting the session, his words came through clearly. The American, Chen, yes, we have him. Facility designation, Arctic Fox, coordinates. He rattled off numbers that Marcus immediately began entering into his tablet. He's alive, mostly. We needed him functional to verify the information he gave us. But Viper 2, she cannot go there. It's a trap within a trap. They know she exists now. They'll be waiting. Megan stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. He's lying about it being a trap. Look at his tells, the way his eye twitches when he lies, the micro expressions he can't control. My father is there, and they're not expecting anyone to come for him because he's been written off for a decade. Marcus studied the coordinates, cross-referencing with satellite imagery that slowly loaded on his screen. It's in disputed territory, technically international waters, but claimed by Russia. A rescue mission would be an act of war if we're caught. Then we don't get caught, Megan said simply. I've trained for this my entire life. Every shooting lesson since I was 8. Every survival exercise in Alaska's worst conditions, every moment of preparation has led to this. She turned to Morrison, Rodriguez, and Walsh. The question is whether the elite SEALs who called me deadweight want to be part of the mission to recover an American hero, or if they want to explain to a review board why they stood by while an 18-year-old girl did their job for them. Walsh stood first, his bearing military straight. I'm in. I've been in since I saw you analyze that tactical situation while I was pissing myself behind a rock. He looked at his teammates. She saved our lives out there. Carter would be dead if she hadn't eliminated those shooters. Rodriguez nodded slowly. My cousin was at Firebase Phoenix when it was overrun in 2013. A sniper team held the perimeter long enough for evac. Found out later it was Viper 1 and her spotter. They saved 43 Marines that day. He met Megan's eyes. I owe your parents a debt. I'm in. Morrison remained seated, his jaw working, as he fought an internal battle between pride and duty. Finally, he stood. I've been an ass. No, worse than that. I've been the kind of leader I swore I'd never become. He faced Megan directly. I can't take back what I said about your mother, but I can help bring your father home, if you'll have me. Before Megan could respond, the door burst open. Elena rushed in, still in her medical scrubs splattered with Carter's blood. He's stable, but barely. The round nicked his subclavian artery. 5 more minutes, and he would have bled out. She looked at Megan with an expression of awe mixed with concern. The entry angle of those shots you took, they were all perfect. Not one of them suffered. Clean kills, every one. That's not just training, that's art. Death shouldn't be art, Megan replied quietly. It should be necessary, precise, and rare. My mother taught me that killing is the failure of all other options. But when it becomes necessary, you owe your enemy the respect of a clean death. She picked up the tablet showing her father's location. He's been imprisoned for 10 years because he and my mother chose duty over safety. Every day he's been there is a day stolen from justice. Next week, I'll tell the story of a female combat medic who was mocked at a veterans bar until they discovered she'd saved an entire platoon in Fallujah. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Like and share if Megan's story touched your heart. Marcus pulled up additional intelligence files, the screen filling with architectural schematics and guard rotations. The Arctic Fox facility is a converted oil platform, reinforced and winterized. Normally houses 15 to 20 personnel, but winter conditions reduce that to 8 or 10. Approach would have to be by water, insertion at night during a storm to mask thermal signatures. I can get us a boat, Hayes said, surprising everyone. Still have contacts in naval intelligence who owe me favors. Zodiac insertion, 2 teams, 1 for extraction, 1 for overwatch. He looked at Megan with paternal pride. Your mother would be strategizing exactly like this. She never met a problem she couldn't solve with proper planning and precise shooting. There's something else, Volkov's voice came through the speaker, his interrogation continuing. Chen knows things, not just about sniper program, but about Arctic operations, about personnel stationed at classified locations. He's been tortured, yes, but he's also been listening. 10 years of listening to guards who thought he couldn't understand Russian. He knows where bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. The CIA interrogator leaned forward. Are you saying he's gathered intelligence while being held? Duh. He pretends to be broken, but his mind is sharp. Like his daughter, he hides strength behind weakness. It's why we could never break him completely. Every time we thought we had him, he would reveal just enough truth mixed with lies to keep us guessing. Frustrating. Admirable, in way. Megan absorbed this information, her tactical mind already working through possibilities. He's been playing dead, waiting for rescue or death, whichever came first. That's why they kept him at a skeleton crew facility. They think he's worthless now, just keeping him alive in case he becomes useful again. 41 hours until Volkov's team is supposed to check in, Marcus announced. After that, Arctic Fox goes on high alert and evac becomes impossible. If we're doing this, we need to move now. The next 16 hours blurred together in a symphony of preparation. Equipment was requisitioned through black channels that didn't officially exist. Morrison worked with Rodriguez to plan approach vectors, while Walsh coordinated with Elena on medical supplies needed for a potentially injured prisoner. Blake, from his cell, tried to bargain for leniency with additional information about Russian operations, but his credibility was shot. He would face trial for treason, his SEAL career ending in disgrace. Megan spent the time at the range, zeroing a rifle for maritime operations. Every shot grouped within a half-inch at 300 meters, despite gusting winds and freezing rain. Morrison watched from the observation post, finally understanding what he'd missed during their first range session. Those 3 misses hadn't been misses at all. She'd been testing wind patterns at exact distances, gathering data for calculations that might save lives when precision mattered most. I owe you an apology, Morrison said, approaching her during a reload, not just for the harassment, but for failing as a leader. A real leader evaluates based on performance, not appearance. Megan chambered another round, sighting downrange. Apologize by bringing my father home alive. That's all that matters now. She fired, the bullet passing through the exact center of a target the size of a quarter. Your problem wasn't just judging by appearance. It was enjoying the feeling of superiority it gave you. That's what made you cruel instead of just mistaken. The truth of her words hit harder than any physical blow. Morrison nodded, accepting the assessment. You're right. I became the kind of person I used to despise. The kind who needs someone beneath them to feel important. Then become better, Megan replied simply. My mother used to say that every sunrise is a chance to be better than you were at sunset. You've got about 6 more sunrises to prove you learned something. The insertion began at 0200 hours, local time. 2 Zodiac boats cut through 3-foot swells in the Bering Sea, their engines muffled to near silence. Megan rowed in the lead boat with Morrison and Rodriguez, while Walsh commanded the second with 2 additional SEALs who'd volunteered for the unsanctioned mission. Hayes coordinated from a command vessel 12 nautical miles away, using satellites that definitely weren't supposed to be tasked for this operation. The Arctic Fox platform loomed out of the darkness like a mechanical spider frozen in ice. Security lights created pools of harsh illumination, but the winter storm provided perfect cover for their approach. Megan studied the structure through her scope, identifying guard positions and counting personnel. 6 on the platform, 2 more inside based on heat signatures. The holding cells are in the substructure, partially below waterline. They breached the platform at 0317. Morrison and Rodriguez taking point while Megan provided overwatch. The first guard never knew what hit him, Walsh's suppressed shot dropping him before he could raise an alarm. They moved through the structure with deadly efficiency, clearing rooms and neutralizing threats with the kind of precision that came from years of training finally being properly applied. The holding area was a nightmare of rust and neglect. 6 cells lined a corridor that reeked of human misery and industrial decay. 5 were empty, their doors hanging open like mouths frozen in screams. The 6th was locked with enough security to hold a dozen men. Inside, barely visible through the small window, was a figure that might once have been human. David Chen had aged 30 years in the past 10. His hair, once black, had gone completely white. His body, once strong enough to carry a 90-pound pack through mountainous terrain, had withered to sinew and bone. But when the door opened and he saw Megan's face, his eyes sparked with life that a decade of torture hadn't extinguished. Sarah? His voice was broken, barely a whisper. No, too young. But those eyes... Recognition dawned slowly, like sunrise after the longest night. Megan, my little shadow, you can't be here. This is trapped. They're waiting for... Dad, Megan interrupted, the word feeling foreign on her tongue after so many years. Mom's gone, but she left me everything I needed to find you. We're getting you out. Chen tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. Morrison and Rodriguez moved in, lifting him carefully, noting the old injuries and new wounds that told the story of a decade in hell. As they carried him toward the exit, an alarm suddenly pierced the night. Movement on the north side, Walsh's voice crackled through comms. 2 helicopters inbound, military configuration. We've got about 4 minutes. Megan shifted into the mindset that had been drilled into her since childhood. Rodriguez, Morrison, get him to the boats. Walsh, maintain overwatch on the helipads. I'll buy us time. You can't take on 2 helicopters with a rifle, Morrison protested. Watch me. Megan was already moving, finding a position that gave her clear sight lines to the approaching aircraft. The Barrett rifle settled against her shoulder like an old friend. She calculated wind speed, distance, the speed of the approaching targets. Her mother had once made a similar shot, taking out a helicopter's tail rotor at 800 meters. But that was in daylight, in Afghanistan's thin air. This was through a winter storm over water. The first helicopter came into range, its searchlight sweeping the platform. Megan's finger found the trigger, her breathing slowed to almost nothing. The shot would have to be perfect, threading between wind gusts to hit a target the size of a dinner plate on a moving aircraft. She fired. The helicopter's tail rotor exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. The aircraft immediately went into an uncontrolled spin, the pilot fighting to maintain any kind of control as he auto-rotated toward the ocean. The second helicopter immediately peeled off, the pilot recognizing the threat and refusing to suffer the same fate. Boats are loaded, Rodriguez's voice came through. We're Oscar Mike in 30 seconds. Megan abandoned her position, sprinting through the platform's superstructure as gunfire erupted behind her. The remaining guards had finally organized, but it was too late. She dove off the platform's edge, a 20-foot drop into churning black water that hit like concrete. The cold was beyond description, instantly stealing her breath and turning her muscles to lead. But Hayes had trained her for this, made her practice cold water operations until she could function in conditions that would kill most people in minutes. Strong hands pulled her into the Zodiac, Morrison and Rodriguez hauling her over the side, while Walsh opened the throttles to maximum. Behind them, the Arctic Fox platform blazed with searchlights and gunfire, but they were already vanishing into the storm, ghosts returning to the darkness that had birthed them. David Chen lay in the bottom of the boat, his eyes fixed on his daughter's face. "Your mother?" he asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Blackwater. She held them off for 16 hours, saved 73 people." Megan's voice remained steady despite the emotions threatening to break through. "She died thinking you were gone." "She knew," Chen whispered. "Sarah always knew things others didn't. That's why she trained you, isn't it? She knew someone would need to finish what we started." He reached out with a trembling hand, touching the dog tags around Megan's neck. "Both tags, hers and mine. I've worn them since I was 8, Megan confirmed. Hayes gave them to me the day we buried an empty coffin for you." The command vessel materialized out of the storm like a steel angel, crew members already preparing to receive them. As they climbed aboard, Colonel Marcus stood waiting with dry clothes and hot coffee. "Extraction successful, but we've got problems. Satellite shows the entire Russian Pacific Fleet mobilizing. They're calling it a terrorist attack." "Let them," Chen said, his voice stronger now despite his condition. "I've got 10 years of intelligence memorized. Guard rotations, personnel files, operation names. They kept me alive as leverage, but I made myself a weapon instead. Every conversation I overheard, every document I glimpsed, it's all up here." He tapped his temple. "The location of every black site from here to Moscow, the names of every American who sold information, the details of operations they thought were secret." Marcus's eyes widened. "That's worth 100 rescue operations. We need to get you to Langley immediately." "No," Chen said firmly. "First, I bury my wife properly. I visit her grave and tell her our daughter became everything she hoped and more. Then Langley can have what's left of me." Morrison cleared his throat. "What about us? We went AWOL for this mission. Court-martial is the best-case scenario." Marcus produced a tablet showing official orders. "What mission?" "You've been on cold weather training exercises all week. Terrible storm, lost some equipment, but everyone performed admirably under harsh conditions. In fact, I'm recommending commendations for exceptional teamwork and leadership under adversity." "And Megan?" Walsh asked. "Viper 2? "Viper 2 doesn't exist," Marcus replied, "but Recruit Hayes has shown exceptional promise and will be fast-tracked through SEAL training with full support from command, assuming that's what she wants." Everyone turned to look at Megan, who stood at the ship's railing, staring out at the dark ocean. The woman who'd endured a week of harassment, who'd single-handedly eliminated a Spetsnaz unit, who'd rescued a father she barely remembered from a decade of captivity, seemed smaller somehow, more human. "My mother once told me that the hardest part of being a warrior isn't learning to fight," she said without turning around. "It's learning when not to. She spent her whole life fighting, and it killed her. My father spent 10 years as a prisoner because of the fight. Maybe it's time for something different." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Whatever you decide, you've earned the right to choose. And for what it's worth, I'll never judge anyone by appearance again. You've taught us more in a week than 10 years of training ever did." Elena's voice came over the ship's intercom. "Medical bay to bridge. Mr. Chen is stable but needs immediate advanced care. Recommend direct course to Anchorage Medical." As the ship turned toward home, Megan finally faced the group. "I'll finish SEAL training, but not to become what my mother was. She was a weapon. I want to be a shield. Someone who protects rather than just eliminates threats. Maybe that's naive, but I've got time to figure it out." Hayes appeared from below decks, moving with the easy grace of a man who'd spent years hiding his true capabilities. "Your mother would be proud. She didn't want this life for you, but she knew you'd need the skills to survive it if it found you anyway." "Did she know about Blake?" Morrison asked. "The mole?" "She suspected someone," Chen said weakly from the stretcher being prepared for helicopter evacuation. "That's why she kept her pregnancy secret, why Megan was raised off the grid. She knew our enemies had people inside. Blake was recruited 3 years ago, but there are others. The intelligence I gathered includes their names." The helicopter arrived with the dawn, its rotors beating the air as it settled onto the ship's helipad. As Chen was loaded aboard, he gripped Megan's hand with surprising strength. "Find the others," he whispered, "the ones still selling out our people. Your mother started a list. It's hidden in her rifle case, the one she taught you to maintain." Megan nodded, understanding passing between them. The mission to rescue her father was complete, but a larger war still raged in the shadows. American soldiers were still dying because of traitors in their midst, and she now had the skills and knowledge to hunt them. "One more thing," Chen said as the medical team prepared to sedate him for transport. Arctic Fox wasn't the only facility. There are 12 more, each holding American personnel thought to be dead. The coordinates are encoded in the maintenance patterns your mother taught you. Each rifle position corresponds to a location. The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone present. 12 more facilities meant dozens of Americans potentially held captive, written off as killed in action while they rotted in secret prisons. It was a secret worth killing for, worth dying for, and now it rested in the mind of an 18-year-old girl who'd proven she could bear any burden. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying David Chen to medical care and debriefing that would reshape American intelligence operations, Morrison approached Megan one last time. "So, what now? You expose the other moles, rescue the prisoners, become the hero your mother was?" "No," Megan said firmly. "Heroes die alone, holding impossible positions. I'm going to build a team. People who understand that strength isn't about size or age or appearance. People who have learned that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one everyone underestimates." She looked at Morrison, Rodriguez, and Walsh. "Interested?" Walsh laughed, the sound carrying relief and admiration. "After what we've seen, how could we say no? Besides, someone needs to make sure you actually eat something besides MREs and protein bars." Rodriguez nodded. "My cousin would never forgive me if I didn't help the daughter of the woman who saved his life. Count me in." Morrison extended his hand. "I've been humbled, educated, and shown exactly how wrong I can be. If you're willing to trust someone who failed so completely at first impressions, I'm yours to command." Megan shook his hand, her grip firm despite the exhaustion that was finally catching up with her. "My mother used to say that redemption is always possible for those willing to earn it. Consider this your chance." As the sun rose over the Alaskan waters, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded everyone of blood and glory, the ship turned toward home. But for Megan Mitchell, codename Viper 2, home had never been a place. It had been a purpose, a mission inherited from parents who had sacrificed everything for their country. Now that mission had evolved, grown beyond simple revenge or rescue. Blake would face justice, his treason exposed by evidence Volkov had provided. The Arctic Fox facility would be quietly dismantled, its existence denied by all parties. David Chen would recover, his intelligence reshaping American understanding of enemy operations. And somewhere in military archives, the file on Viper 1 would be updated with a single line: "Daughter active, legacy continues." But the real resolution came 3 days later, at a small cemetery outside Anchorage. David Chen, supported by crutches but standing on his own, faced the headstone of Sarah Mitchell. Megan stood beside him, no longer the scared recruit or the deadly sniper, but simply a daughter mourning with her father. "She knew," Chen said quietly, "the last radio transmission before Blackwater. She said, 'Tell our shadow she has work to do.' I thought it was delirium, but she knew you'd come for me someday." Megan pulled out a small device, one of the encrypted communicators from her kit. She set it on the grave, its light blinking steadily like a heartbeat. "It's connected to our operations frequency, so she'll always be part of the team." Morrison, Rodriguez, and Walsh stood at respectful distance, understanding this was a private moment, but their presence meant something. The team Megan had spoken of was already forming. Hayes watched from further back, his weathered face showing the satisfaction of a mission finally complete. As they turned to leave, Megan's encrypted phone buzzed. The message was simple: coordinates and a date, 2 weeks away, another black site, another American prisoner. The work Sarah Mitchell had started would continue, but not in the way anyone expected. "You sure about this?" Chen asked his daughter as they walked back to the vehicles. "This life, it takes everything." "Then we take it back," Megan replied. "One mission at a time, one life at a time. Mom held the line alone. I won't make that mistake." A figure watched from the tree line, too distant to identify, but clearly military in bearing. They raised something, a A scope, binoculars, or perhaps a camera, observing the group for exactly 10 seconds before melting back into the forest. Megan noticed, her hand moving instinctively to her sidearm, but she didn't pursue. Some shadows were meant to remain mysteries, at least for now. At the vehicles, Elena waited with medical supplies and something more precious, hot chocolate and homemade sandwiches. Figured you might need actual food after a week of whatever passes for nutrition on secret missions. As they drove away, the cemetery fading in the rearview mirror, Walsh asked the question everyone was thinking. That watcher in the woods, friend or foe? Neither, Megan said with certainty that came from somewhere deeper than training. That was one of Mom's shadows. She trained others, scattered them like seeds. They're watching, waiting to see if I'm worthy of the legacy. And if you're not? Morrison asked. Megan smiled, the expression transforming her face from warrior to the teenager she'd never really been allowed to be. Then they'll make sure I become worthy. That's what shadows do. They follow until you're ready to cast your own. The convoy reached the base as full dark settled over Alaska, the same gate where old Hayes had stood watch for years, playing the role of harmless old man while training a weapon disguised as a foster daughter. The same barracks where Megan had been tormented for a week, enduring harassment that had ultimately exposed a traitor and rescued a hero. The same range where impossible shots had been fired through winter storms, proving that the blood of legends ran true. Everything had changed. The SEALs who had witnessed Viper 2 would never again judge by appearance. Rodriguez stood outside the barracks, staring at dead weight, still faintly visible. The best was right in front of us, wearing old boots and eating alone. Under the northern lights, Megan's phone buzzed. Ready to know the truth about Blackwater? She typed, always. Then look deeper at Marcus. Nothing is what it seems. The message self-deleted. Colonel Marcus, friend or foe? In her quarters, Megan opened her mother's rifle case, finding a hidden note listing 12 names, 12 coordinates, and a chilling message. Trust no one above 05. The Barat goes to the top. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and they think they've won. Prove them wrong. Love, Mom. P.S. Marcus saved my life, but also cost me everything. Choose carefully who you trust. Outside, the watcher in the woods sent an encrypted message. Viper 2 is ready. The hunt begins. Phones buzzed worldwide. The daughter of legends had announced herself. As sleep took her, one thought echoed through Megan's mind. I am Viper 2. I am my mother's daughter, my father's shadow, and your worst nightmare. Come for me, if you dare. The northern lights danced on, blessing a young woman who proved the weakest-looking person often carries the strength to change the world.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.